All right, in this video, we're going to go through an example, or last example in this section on preparing a balance sheet. But this time, we are going to do it with our trial balance having revenues and expenses. Now, what you should know about a trial balance that has revenue and expenses, you can't do a balance sheet without doing the other statements that we learned in the last two lessons. So you actually need to do the income statement and the statement of retained earnings first before you do the balance sheet if you have revenues and expenses in your trial balance. And the reason why is we actually have to close out the revenues and our expenses, which we'll learn in another section, but we have to close those out first so that all those numbers tie in to an asset, liability, or an equity account. Otherwise, our balance sheet will not balance. So if you're going through this and you're just picking off the assets and you're picking off the liabilities and you're picking off the equity and your balance sheet doesn't balance, it's because you haven't done an income statement first or a statement of retained earnings to be able to close all those accounts out to the proper places that they would go on a balance sheet. So know that. That's why we did the income statement and the statement of retained earnings prior to getting you to the balance sheet video here. All right, so let's take a look here. So we've got this information that we already know, right? So we've got our unadjusted trial balance. It looks like we've got some revenues and expenses here. So we're gonna have to do the income statement, do the statement of retained earnings, which we already did, before we do the balance sheet. We also know that the income statement looks like this once we did it in two lessons ago. In the last lesson, we looked at the statement of retained earnings. We completed that. So now it's time to do the balance sheet. Now, what I've done just from a space standpoint, so that I can actually write in the boxes, I've got the assets on one, and then I've got my liabilities and stockholder equity on the next slide. So I've got them there. That's why it says balance sheet partial at the very top. Remember again that this is easy because I've given you all the accounts on the left-hand side to follow. I've given you your header, but if you had to create this from scratch, you'll have to create it from scratch. Now again, there are two columns that numbers can go into. If the account is totaled, I like to use the middle column here to put the subsidiary numbers, and then from there we'll add them all up, and then we'll put that large number on the right hand column. So just know that as we go through this. I know sometimes it gets a little bit like, man, there's so many boxes here, where do I put the number? I'll show you kind of how I do it as I go through this. All right, so with that, let's start with how would we solve this. So the one thing that I would do here is I would go through my trial balance and I would identify all of our assets, liabilities, and equity. Now, we already closed out all of our revenues and expenses through the income statement and the statement of retained earnings, so I really don't care about these accounts right here anymore. Okay, because I've already dealt with those. So now we're just going to go through each one of them and classify them as an asset, liabilities, or equity. So cash, asset; accounts receivable, asset; prepaid insurance expense, asset; supplies, asset; equipment, asset; sign, asset; logo, asset; accounts payable, liabilities; deferred revenue, liabilities; notes payable, liabilities; common stock, owner's capital. So now that I've done that, now I know where they're going to go on the balance sheet. Now, the one thing that's not on here that's usually on here is the retained earnings, but we had a retained earnings of 0, so that's why it's not here. So we're going to pull the retained earnings from the statement of retained earnings rather than off the balance sheet. So know that, notate that. Don't pull your retained earnings amount from the unadjusted trial balance. Instead, pull it off your statement of retained earnings, because that's the most up-to-date number that you're going to need. All right. So with that, we can, if you want to screenshot this, you can screenshot this because this is not on the actual balance sheet page. So, all right, moving on here. So let's go ahead and start filling in some numbers here. So my asset here, we're going to start with current assets. So current assets, cash. We had cash reported at $47,700 on the unadjusted trial balance. Accounts receivable, we had reported at $500. Prepaid insurance is at $1,500, and then supplies was $825. Now, the reason I'm putting them on the left side is because those are the subsidiary numbers that we're going to transfer by adding them all up, and then we'll have this big, huge total current asset. So if we see total current asset, that means that we got to sum up something first and then move it over. So if you add up all four of those numbers, you should get 50,527. I'll put it on the right side because that's the final number, right? That's the final total current asset number. All right, so what about the equipment, sign, and logos? Notice that we don't add those up per se. We add them in the total asset, but that also includes the 50,527. Because we don't add those up, I'm just going to put them on the right side. So equipment we had was 11,850. Sign we had 6,540. And logo we had 650. If I add, so that's what we would do there because we don't have a subsidiary, or we don't have a subsidiary calculation, or I don't know what it's called, but anyways, we don't have a calculation in the middle. So in this case, we're just going to put it on the right hand side, because now when we get to total assets, we can add up all the right side numbers, right? So we can add up the 50,527, the 11,850, the 6,540, and the 650. You add up those four numbers, you should get 69,565. So our total assets is 69,565. Be careful. Some students love to add up all the numbers on the page, which means that they're double counting the cash, the AR, the prepaid insurance, and then the supplies. And you don't want to do that. You won't get the 69,000. You'll get like $100 and something thousand. All right, moving on to the liability side here, liability and stockholders' equity. So there are some formatting issues here. Apologize, but let's start with our current liabilities. So our current liabilities, we first have deferred revenue. Deferred revenue is $1,000. Accounts payable was 10,790. So those were the two current liabilities. We can add those up together and we get total current liabilities of 11,790. The next we have is notes payable. In this case, notes payable, we don't actually add up all the long-term liabilities. So I'm just going to put the notes payable on the far right. So $10,000 is the number that I have. So my total liabilities would be total short-term and my total long-term. In this case, $21,790. Okay. Going into stockholders' equity. So stockholders' equity, no additions here. So we're going to go ahead and put the information on the right-hand side. Common stock was 40,000. And then retained earnings, we're going to take from the statement of retained earnings. So if I go back here, statement of retained earnings said we had $7,775. Therefore, that's the number we're going to use. So $7,775. Okay. Now you got to be a little careful here, because sure, we could have put these two numbers over here, but it doesn't make sense. So this number right here encapsulates these two numbers here. So we don't need to add those two numbers into our total stockholders' equity. We just need to add up 21,000, 40,000, and $7,775. So if we add those three numbers, we should get $69,565, which is exactly the amount that we were expecting, because that matches our total assets. 69,565, 69,565, our balance sheet ties. So we probably did everything correctly. If we didn't put numbers in the wrong accounts but the same classes, we're pretty good here. Okay, so a couple of things to think about when we're talking about the balance sheet. The number one thing that you want to think about is that you might not have it this easy, so you're going to have to prepare it on your own. Assets go first, liabilities, stockholders' equity. We have some intermediate calculations. That's what it's called. We have some intermediate calculations. If you have intermediate calculations like total current asset, you'll want to put the numbers on the left-hand side, then add them up, and then put that final total on the right-hand side. Now, something like this that's on your screen here, where we have total liabilities and total stockholders' equity, it's not going to be as straightforward when you add up the whole column on the right-hand side, but that's just because total liabilities is important. So, well, really, we have two components that we're kind of smushing together because of the accounting equation. So know that as well. Okay, so that's how we do it. we need to do the income statement first, statement of retained earnings, and then we can get to the balance sheet. So hopefully this was a helpful video, and it again reiterates and continues to solidify that foundation of how we do accounting from a financial statement standpoint, and how really it becomes easier the more that you do it. So hope you enjoyed this section, and we'll see you in the new section in the next video. Hey guys, it is Patrick. Don't forget to press the like button and share this video with someone who could get a lot of use from watching this lesson, like maybe a classmate or maybe a friend or maybe just a parent, just because you wanted to share this video because you're very excited about what you saw. Share it with someone. And if you want to help us grow and help us make sure that we put the very best in accounting topics out on YouTube, make sure you press the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. That way you're alerted every time we post videos to this channel. Now, I do this with every one of my classes at the end of class. What did you learn from this lesson? Put that in the comment section below, and I'll respond to you on what you got out of this video. So hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you in the next lesson.